Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. We don't care where you're listening, when you're listening, or how you're listening. We're just glad that you are. We hope that you'll like us, share us with your friends, subscribe wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Interact with us on Twitter, like so many of you do, at DELHS Football. That's DELHS Football. And of course, our Facebook page, the DELHS Football Pod. Marty, we thought we're waiting for a week where there's not something basically unrelated to football that happens. We thought it might be this week. And it's not. I was at the game at Appo High-Middletown. Most of you have already know, basically what happened. In the long story short, it's been reported and confirmed that two people were shot outside of the entrance gate at Appo High-Middletown. If you're not familiar with the school, there's a circle, they call it, at the entrance gate, and you go around that circle and you enter into the stadium. That is, if you were there before kickoff. If you got there after kickoff, you sat in line like my wife did for about an hour on Chop Tank Road. You got to the gate to be told the gate was closed and they weren't letting anybody else in. So that's another issue for another time. But anyway, how it unfolded, just real quickly, I was there, game ended. I come out of the press box, walk down to the field to say hello to a friend. Friend's husband is an EMT in Middletown, so he gets all the alerts on his phone. And he'd got an alert that there was a report of a shooting right outside the entrance to Appo High-Middletown High School, and everybody was en route, law enforcement, ambulance, et cetera, et cetera. And so it wasn't a frantic thing like happened at Appicinio several weeks ago. Right. It was word of mouth, spread by word of mouth, spread by text message, spread by social media, et cetera, et cetera. And so there was never a sense of panic at the end of when it was all said and done. But the reality of it was, there's one way in and one way out of that complex. Another issue we'll talk about very quickly. Yes. And that was shut down because that's where the crime scene, which is what it was at that point. That's where the crime scene was. And so lockdown is not the right word because there were just as many people in their cars, scurrying around in the parking lot in a calm way, like kids do after a football game. Yes. That was a good football game, a close football game, closer than a lot of people thought. And we'll talk about that also. But the reality of it was, when it was all said and done, I want to give my hats off to everybody that was involved. And I'm going to separate the law enforcement officials because they were involved in the crime itself. But the people that were left in the band room where my son was, in the building where other people were, in the locker rooms where both teams were, because nobody who was at the game when the final horn sounded was able to leave the parking lot at that point. And it could have been a case where people were getting upset, people getting mad. I want to get home. I had to get up the next morning at 6 o'clock and go to work downstate to MC an event. And here I am, it's 10 o'clock at night. And I'm told basically you're here for the next hour, which is about what it took, maybe 45 minutes. Yep. But again, I want to credit the Appo administrators. I'm not sure which administrator was on staff that night. They rotate. Certainly athletic director Chris Mascara was a big part in how this was handled. And there was just, and this is what I told people, I said, look, if somebody had told me you have to be involved in basically a shooting at a high school event, even though it was outside the event, outside of the district boundaries, for lack of a better word, it was not on Appo High School property. It was out in the circle, which is outside of the Appo High School property. And this is where Bunker Hill Elementary is as well. Actually, the shooting took place closer to Bunker Hill Elementary just because of the proximity of that school to the circle than the high school. And if somebody had said, look, you're going to be part of one of these, I couldn't imagine a better one to be part of, other than for obviously the two people that got hurt. And fortunately, neither is suffering from life-threatening injuries, despite one being heliported out that night. And so just everything, the way it was handled I can't imagine handling what they did and how they did a whole lot better, because they kept calm. There was no panic. Part of that was because there was no gunshot heard. There was enough of a crowd, sold out crowd, great atmosphere for a Friday night. Curious if this game will ever take place again on Friday night, the big rivalry game between the two schools. But it really was handled well from start to finish by the people on site there. The parents of the band people who weren't allowed to leave the band room weren't upset. They were allowed in, to make sure that their child was okay. And I did go in and checked on my kid. My other kid was out sitting in the car. I knew everybody knew they were safe at that point, because it had been reported that the suspect fled away from the complex, back what they call the bridge, which goes back over the new 301, went over the bridge back into the middle of town, basically. And I have not heard whether he's been captured or not.
I haven't either.
Yeah. So,
no.
So that's the point we're at. We're recording Sunday afternoon at 2:30. And, we do know there were two suspects or two victims shot. Don't know if it was more than one suspect or just one suspect, but that will all come out in the end. But just wanted to commend Appo High on how they handled the situation. And I talked to the athletic director, Chris Mascara, on Saturday at the Sally soccer game. Again, shout out to Appo High upsetting Sally's #1 team in the country on Saturday. I know this isn't a soccer podcast, but could be a football contest for that. So wanted to throw that comment in there. But anyway, I talked to Chris Mascara and he said, yeah, we're going to meet Monday. And that's how I run events for a living. I've been doing it for 33 years with Special Olympics. And when you have something go wrong at an event, or you have an incident, not to say something went wrong because it was nobody's fault who was running the event. First thing you do is you meet and you talk about it. What did we do right? What did we do wrong? What will we do next time? And so, again, it's another week of high school football where something off the field dominates the headlines rather than something on the field.
Yeah, it's right. And I was with you at the way it was handled. I haven't heard a single complaint from anyone who was there that said it should have been handled differently, or that the police presence should have been handled differently. It sounds like Appo did everything right. The school did everything right. The school district, however, they released a statement, and I'm guessing there had to be some legal issue with why they issued this statement. I don't know, but the statement says, on Friday evening, an incident occurred off school property on Bunker Hill Road with injuries involved. That's it. And the police are investigating. No, we hope they're okay. It kind of reminded me of the mayor of Amity in the Jaws movie with, supposedly some bathers were injured the other day. No, they were eaten by sharks. You had two teenagers shot outside the school. Now, granted, technically, no, it was not on school property. But when your first instinct from a PR standpoint, and you've told me this because you worked in PR forever, you don't cover your own butt, and you make sure you relate to the victims, or send out some sort of outpouring of emotion or something for the victims, the old thoughts and prayers, at least something to just say that, to separate themselves. Hey, by the way, this didn't happen on my property. Right. This is my neighbor's house. This wasn't me. And to make no mention of the fact that A, they were shot, and that B, they were kids, and these kids were hospitalized, and we hope these kids are okay. We're praying for everyone involved. The last thing they say is the state police are investigating and have asked for anyone's help. Right. It was just, to your point, they handled it so well up until whoever decided to put this statement out. It's just so cold, and they could have done better than this. This was not the way to go. The first instinct should not have been, let's make sure they know this didn't happen on our property. I was disappointed, as were a number of people I saw on Twitter with the statement as well.
Yeah, my first reaction, again, I'm a PR person and learned a long time ago, you first sympathize with the victims. And that's all you have to do in one sentence. When I first read it, I thought, wow, they're trying to cover their butts right off the bat.
Yes.
And there's a couple of reasons they could do that. They don't want to be flooded with phone calls, because it really is not their situation at that point. If it, even if the kid, and again, I'm not sure if they knew it was kids when they made the statement or not, or if it, I don't want to get into all that, the legal mumbo jumbo, but I think one of the things they do when they review how this was handled, and like you said, there's been enough feedback from other people about how, compassion should have come first and then the facts. And so right. I have no problem with them letting the public know it did not happen on school property, but I did have, my first instinct was, wow, that wasn't very compassionate, statement for whoever
there's
was
no
involved.
Compassion at all.
And especially if they didn't know at that point who was involved, that's even more of a reason to make it compassionate in case it was a student, a parent, or what have you. So again, that will be part of the review process. And my guess is someone will, make a note that next time something like this happens, we have to do this. Now, I want to talk about the entrance situation. There's 3 Appoquinimink high schools. On 2 of them, Odessa and Appoquinimink High School, there's only one way in and one way out. And so I started thinking, and that is the reason why these cars couldn't leave. It wasn't because they feared there was an active shooter. It was because it was a crime scene. And there were people, I talked to somebody today who had actually left and gotten out. This happened, and then they passed it on their way back, and they were rerouted because they said they're still cleaning up, picking up the shells and all that. There's a lot that goes into, especially when there's a shooting. I know with car accidents, that could shut down that circle for 3 hours, let alone when there's a shooting. So it wasn't that they were worried about an active shooter, because remember, at no point during this situation. Again, I was there. At no point did they clear kids and people out of the parking lot into the school where it would be safe safer if there was an active shooter. And so that's not why the cars weren't moving. The cars weren't moving because they were cleaning up that shooting, that crime scene, basically.
Right.
And so my thinking is, what happened if a tractor trailer with chemicals in it turns over in that circle when there's 500 cars in the parking lot? There's nowhere for those cars to go.
Right.
And we all know those hazmat scenes don't get cleaned up quickly.
Right.
It's not a quick cleanup. I would have been there for the night, sleeping in the car, most likely. So it'll be interesting to see, because again, first time ever at Appo High where they've had this situation where people literally could not get out of the parking lot. At Middletown High, there's 2 ways in, 2 ways out. So that's not an issue.
Right.
At Odessa, unless I'm incorrect, I believe there's only 1 way in and 1 way out. Now, once you get in there, you can go 14 different ways to get to the three different schools that are on that campus. But unless I'm missing something, and I might be, there's 1 way in and 1 way out.
Right.
And so it'll be interesting to see how they issue. And I don't know what the answer at Appo. Odessa, I think, would be easy to throw another road in there because that was a big farm that was turned into,
right.
There's plenty of ins and out there. Appoquinimec, that's not the situation because, it backs up to the new 301 there and there's woods on the other side. And so I'm not sure how they do that, but it'll be interesting. But one more thing about this, this thing impacted another game because after this happened, the Howard Archmere game, which had already been moved to 5 o'clock so it would be played in the light, ended. It didn't end in light, but it's, it was light for 2.5 hours.
Right.
They said that 2 adults only into the stadium. And so each cheerleader, I don't know whether I'm sure the band members got 2 tickets,
right.
Each cheerleader and each player for both teams, 2 people in must be adults. So there were no kids there. Supposedly, I wasn't there. But
no, well, apparently, I guess it was if you what I understood was if it was a kid and an adult, you had to have at least one of them had to be an adult and it had to be a family member. So if you had an adult and like your son or your daughter,
you were okay
with them. Okay. Now, I tell you what, that when I first saw that thing from Archmere, the statement from them, it just sent shivers down my spine because didn't we just have this during COVID? I mean, people, if this stuff doesn't clean up and seriously, this nonsense and this buffoonery, whatever is starting to happen outside of games. And again, it may have nothing to do with the games at all, but it's happening in proximity enough that it's affecting things. Right. And I got a couple of questions this week about, do you think Friday night lights are over? Dover's already changed some games. Archmere last night, they did the 2-person only. And, that's where we're headed.
Yeah.
If this stuff doesn't clean up, I mean, the schools are just going to say, we're not going to do night games. I mean, we're not going to take that chance from a legal perspective, from safety. Number one is safety of the players and the fans. But yeah, this stuff has to stop. And I don't know how to do it. Somebody said, well, apparently one of the things that helped cause the problem the other night was that I guess when they stopped admitting people at halftime, which as far as I know, they've always done. I don't remember being able to get into a game, even back when I was in high school after halftime. Yeah. The gates were always closed. Excuse me. And I guess there were a ton of kids milling around outside. And someone said, well, isn't there a way to disperse them? And of course, my response was, well, there is, but 1, who's going to do it? And 2, who's going to pay for it?
Right.
I mean, those things don't come free. The cops just don't come and say, hey, by the way, can you leave the parking lot?
Right.
It's a little different than at UD if they were to need to say, okay, you guys need to clear out, the game started, no more tailgating here. At a stadium like Appo or anywhere in Delaware High School, it's a little different. So I don't know what the answer is.
The cops are inside.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. Right.
So yeah, this is, I have a feeling, like I said, when I saw that, the first thing I thought was, oh my God, when we started to emerge from the COVID fog, a lot of the schools did that. Sanford was one of them that said only, 1 adult or 2 adults per person. Right. And it just feels like we could be headed that way again if this nonsense doesn't stop.
And I think it starts with rivalry games. I mean, that's what Dover did. They moved their rivalry game next Saturday to Saturday afternoon. Yep. This is a rivalry game. This is the only game at Appo High that will have that will be sold out. It's the only game that will be sold out. It wouldn't matter who the opponent was. And the same thing happened last year when they went to Middletown. I think the game sold out. They had some issues. Now, they didn't have any gun issues that I remember, but there were plenty of fights underneath the bleachers, et cetera. And that was, if you remember, right after that game, the district came out with a policy for all of its football games that middle school kids and younger could not attend without an adult.
Right.
And so they took that step that at least eliminated everybody 15 and younger from coming to the games, which they do in that district. Parents drop those kids off because they think it's a very safe place to be. It's going to be interesting to see how that impacts that. I saw some chatter on Facebook, and you saw it as well. Not sure I'll let my kid go to a game by themselves.
No,
again.
I got a lot of that on Twitter.
I can see this Middletown Appo rivalry game becoming a Saturday afternoon game. And you know what? As much as I enjoyed the atmosphere on a Friday night, I'm not sure why they wouldn't make it a Saturday afternoon game. Why take the risk after 2 consecutive years of having issues at the football rivalry game between Middletown and Appoquinimink? Why take the risk? You're not going to lose fans. It's still going to be close to a sellout because this game is that big in that area.
Right.
And if people have that much notice, they're not going to schedule anything else on a Saturday. So why take the risk? You can still play your other 4 home games at night under the lights when you won't have a crowd of this size that will attract the magnitude of fans and players and not players, but fans and students to it that it does.
Right.
So I can see the district making that policy. And you know what? There'll be some people that are upset about it. I'm not one of them. I'll be one of them that supports it. Why not? You play football for the game itself.
Yes.
You don't play it for the atmosphere. Is it fun to play under the lights? Absolutely. Is it fun to play in front of a sold out crowd? Absolutely. But as we learned in COVID, the game is the game itself.
Yep.
And that's the most important thing to the players, not having to think in the back of their mind when a truck zooms down 301 and backfires, was that a shot or was that a truck? And now I'm not focused on the game, which is the purpose of it. So one last thing, Marty, and then we're going to move on. What do you got?
I was just going to say, it's a lot of the kids, and I think we might have mentioned this last week, but they kind of use this as the way malls were used in the 80s. The kids now use these as their social gathering places.
Yep.
And so you have a ton of kids who aren't interested in the game at all. Nope. And then you have these side things going on, and who knows what gets started with whom. But yeah, it's the most important thing is the players that put in all this work. And by the way, this was a fun game.
It was.
And it gets shuffled to the back because of all this nonsense afterwards. And it's a shame, but I agree. If they were to say every game was going to be played during the afternoon, I could care less. As long as the games are played, the kids get to play, and fans are still allowed in the stadium, but we just played at a more reasonable hour. That's all.
And we can't play Friday afternoon, so that's not a good suggestion because the referees all work. The majority of them are not teachers. They don't get off at 3:30 or 4 o'clock to go referee games, so that's not an option. I had somebody reach out to me that said, "Well, why don't they just do that?" Well, that's why they don't have the referees.
Yeah, these aren't full time. Not even some of the major sports leagues have full time referees. Yeah. These guys are not doing this as a full time job.
Yeah. So anyway, we'll update you if we hear any more on that. All right, let's talk football. But before we do, this day and age, we all think our iPhones are great cameras. That is until you see a team photo, individual portrait, or an action shot taken used with a professional camera, and more importantly, having a pro behind the lens. Andre Smith of Andre L Photography takes unbelievable sports photos. It doesn't matter the sport or the age of the athlete playing it. If you're looking to capture your child playing sports to create memories that will last a lifetime, Andre is your man. A former photographer with the News Journal, he is a pro, and he's as pro as it gets. Whether it's a league or team photo day, individual portrait session, or game day action shots, he's the man you want to call. You can see all his work at www.andrelphotography, and that's photography.com. And again, if you're interested in having your business or your sole proprietorship, whether you're whether you're an accountant or something, you have your own place and you want to help support sports here in Delaware, and you want to advertise on the podcast or sponsor one of our sections of the podcast, please let us know. You can reach out to me directly at jonbuzby@hotmail.com, or you can communicate with us, as many of you do already, on Twitter and Facebook. Twitter is DELHS Football, and Facebook is the DELHS Football Pod. Just Google either one of them and they will pop up. All right, let's go to the football field. All right, Concord and McCain. Concord comes away with a 28-24 lead, breaks McCain's undefeated streak at 3. They trailed McCain by 17 points, Marty, to start the fourth quarter.
Yes.
Jerron Wright scores on a 4-yard run with 56 seconds left to complete the comeback. And this was just, I was shocked. I think we've mentioned McCain every week so far. This is the
Yes.
McCain team
Yep.
that lost that beat Odessa last year in week 1, didn't win a game the rest of the season, didn't have many close games at all. And they start out the season with a bang and thought that, hey, here they go again. They're going to win again. And all of a sudden, Concord comes back and runs away with a 28-24 lead. And for Concord, that was a huge win, Marty, because they were 0-2 and they've got Caravel next. And so they do not have an easy week next week. And so picking up this win was huge for the program.
And not only that, but it was devastating for McCain. I think when you look at what they have left on their schedule, they're going to have to steal a win somewhere along the line against somebody that they may not be expected to beat. I agree. McKeevis Rogers, who's been phenomenal this year, through 3 touchdown passes early. It's 24/7. They are in cruise control. And then all of a sudden you see on Twitter, it's 28-14, it's 28-21. And you're like, what is happening here? And in that fourth quarter, I don't know what happened with Concord. They just flipped the switch. McCain could not move the ball at all. The Concord defense was ferocious. They were all over the field. And all of a sudden, Concord is running the ball with confidence. They're passing the ball with confidence. Jarrah Wright was the one who gave them the lead on a 3-yard run with 56 seconds to play. They got the ball back at the McCain 40 with 3:27 left and basically killed all the clock before they scored that winning touchdown. This was a great win for Concord, who has really struggled at times over the last several years. Is a huge confidence boost for them. And for McCain, again, I think this is just a devastating loss for them. They've got Delaware Military, Delaware Military Academy next week.
Yeah.
So that's a tough one. They've got Del Castle, which seems to be in a Jekyll and Hyde mode, kind of like Hodgson this season. And that Newark, who played great yesterday, Mount Pleasant, St. Mark's, and Lake Forest. So there's some tough games on this slate. Now, if they were able to get off to that 3-0 start or the 4-0 start, they would have been sitting pretty in the district and otherwise. And this is that was a blow. That's a tough one. They're going to have to they get these kids back to work on Monday after school. There's going to be probably a little bit of a period where they got to get over this, get these kids past this, talk about what happened, and get them refocused. Because again, with the AI connection with the kids from AI DuPont, this has been a great story, but this was definitely a little bump in the road for McCain.
And I was trying to figure out what might have caused it. I was trying to look beyond just the score, and I looked at the games that they've played this year, and they haven't had to protect a big lead except against Odessa in the opener. They led the Ducks by 22-0. But remember, this is an Odessa team that doesn't have any seniors on it. Right. So the experience there, the veteran experience you would rely on in a case like that, they don't have. They had back and forth games with Polytech and with Conrad, where they had to come from behind and take a lead, but the lead was never 17 points heading into the fourth quarter. So the lesson probably here that Coach Carey is going to talk about is, guys, we don't quit when we're up 17 in the fourth quarter. We've got to continue to play. And you know what? The coaches may also take a look at, we didn't see the game. It wasn't broadcast anywhere. No. The coaches may take a look at, were we too protective?
Yeah, I wondered
of a 17-point
that too.
lead and stop trying to score, and all of a sudden, boom, boom, and you only got a 1-score lead and you don't have the ball anymore. So, again, McCain goes to DMA, Concord goes to Caravel. So both of them are going to have challenging games to come off this game. You mentioned Newark. Boy, I was writing my part of my column for the Newark Post, and I called it the heavily favored St. Mark's team, because I think, with St. Mark's undefeated and just playing well, including beating a Class 3 team, Appoquinimink, and Newark with 2 good wins and 2 solid wins for District 2 or Class 2, excuse me. I don't think anybody, if I had given them a point spread of 10 points, they probably would have taken St. Mark's by more than 10.
Yep. I agree. And I would have said somewhere 14-17. St. Mark's offense was just playing phenomenal. Their defense was playing lights out. They were still missing some kids from last week, but they were the same kids missing that they destroyed Woodbridge with. Now, the difference is, going into that game, you could say that St. Mark's was in a position where this is a trap game and we got to be up for this. And they were. Boy, they went down there and fired up. This is a morning game. And it is a game against a Newark team that, while they were 3-0, nobody thought Newark could hang in this game. I didn't. I know I didn't.
2-0.
And all of a sudden, you start to struggle and you start to find out, the muscles starting to tighten, kids start clenching the teeth a little bit, and all of a sudden, you're in a fight for your life here. And this is the most interesting thing, and I didn't know this till yesterday. Mia Carew, a sophomore for Newark, is their kicker.
Mhm.
She is 7 for 9 on PATs for the season. For whatever reason, I don't know why, she was not available yesterday. That's what I was told.
Mhm.
So they did not have her. So they ended up having to go for 2 every time yesterday. You add her into that mix, I think this might
Yeah.
I think St. Mark's comes out here with a loss.
Right.
She was almost automatic early on in the season. Yeah, Chase Pantalano scored a 5-yard run in the second overtime, and then I love this. You have Pantalano scoring the touchdown, and then Matteo Bracalante. Sounds like an episode of The Sopranos. Pantalano runs it in, Bracalante finishes it off with the PAT. Which, by the way, I heard people say, "Oh God, what an easy thing." It is not easy to be a high school
No.
kicker. I don't care who
No.
you are, and we'll talk about a really good one in a little while.
Right.
It is not easy. You go out there with all that pressure on you, and this kid drilled it through the uprights. So
There's a reason a lot of these teams are bringing in girl soccer players to kick them.
exactly right, exactly right. Because some of them, they don't know any better. They don't follow
No.
football. They're used to playing soccer. They come in and kick the ball, and that's that.
Yep.
And by the way, the history of girl kickers in Delaware is pretty darn good.
Impressive. Yeah.
And Middletown has had a long history of that
Mhm.
going back. So that was a big change. And Damian Wright was phenomenal for Newark yesterday. He had 2 touchdown passes to Jaden Smith. He also added the OT TD run. Just a shame how this ended for Newark. Boy, they put up a fight. And if you're St. Mark's and you're Joey Wright, you love that the grit that your team showed here, and they still were able to come away with a win. They stay undefeated. And now they know, okay, we've been in a really tight game, and we play.
Right.
That's 2 now. They had a fight with Appo, they had a fight with Newark. So this team has blown people out. They've won the close games. So a lot to be happy about if you're St. Mark's coming out of that.
Yeah, they're battle tested for sure. Undefeated at 4-0. They're going to travel to Conrad, that hasn't won a game yet. Newark 2-1 now. They're going to travel to Delcastle, which is 0-3. So both these teams have winnable games next week. Let's put it that way. All right, Sally, St. George's, another close game. Down to the final thing. It was Tomier White's 1-yard run with 5:10 left that put St. George's up 14-13. But then James Collins, the kicker you just referred to that we'd be talking about, kicks a 35-yard field goal with 39 seconds to win it. And then as Sally's not to win it, but put them up. And then Sally's intercepted St. George's on their last possession, trying to get up there. It was Bill Denarder's 300th win, 37 years as a head coach, at 2 at Caravel, then went on to Middletown, then went on to Sally's. He's got 7 state titles, 4 of them with Sally's, 3 of them were Middletown back in the Division II days for the Cavaliers. But Marty, this was one of those games that we had, will tell us something, but I'm not sure it told us a whole lot, because you can basically call it a draw,
Right.
even though on the scoreboard it wasn't. If these teams played 5 more times, it would the outcomes would be 3 wins and 2 losses for one of the teams, and it'd probably be close game. So I'm not sure either one of them edged themselves as the one, hey, we belong above the other one. But it was a great football game.
It was. And St. George's shot themselves in the foot at the end. I believe they got called for an offside penalty when Collins was going to end up having to kick a longer field goal. So they were able to move that closer. He's 3 for 4 on field goals yesterday, 42 and 2 35-yarders. The only one he missed was 50, which we'll excuse him on that one. Ryan Storr, the quarterback for Sally's, the freshman, 15-24, 209 yards. He's gaining a lot of confidence. Donovan Brooks, the guy who killed Sally's in the game last year, he was great again, 13-23, 134 yards, ran 14 times for 94. When you have a kicker like Collins, by the way, I got to point out, Twitter Phil was on Benny Mitchell's pick show this week. And one of the things I got to give him credit, when they talked about the Sally's game, he said the difference in this game is going to be 2 words, James Collins. And he nailed that one, because if they don't have James Collins, they don't win this ball game. And one thing I love, and Brad Meyer did this, and I want to make sure we do it too. You and I both know, and you used to highlight this when we were calling games, it takes a good unit to execute a field goal. Frank Holodick is the long snapper for Sally's. Jacob Tiberi, the backup quarterback, was the holder. If those 2 guys don't do their job, it doesn't matter how good James Collins is. No. So the 3 of them have to work together as a unit. So I want to point out that entire Sally's field goal unit, those 3 guys, Frank Holodick, Jacob Tiberi, and James Collins, all the credit in the world, because that is not an easy job to do. I don't care who you are. I would say, if I'm the guy who had to hold the snaps, I'm sweating like crazy just watching these guys, thinking, I can't believe more of these guys don't drop the ball.
Right.
But just a phenomenal showing from that unit.
Yeah, it was. And that's great that you pointed them out. And it's, it was a great game. It was a great high school football game on a Saturday afternoon. And so, it's going to be interesting to see. We're going to talk about our top 4 teams in each of the 3 classes. So I don't want to get into that now, whether either you or I have either of those teams in that top 4. All right, let's go to Dover Cape. Dover with a 33-12 win. That game was never out of question. I was doing PA system for Appo, but I was following this game on my phone, and Dover scored touchdowns on their first 5 drives, didn't punt once. Jaquan Kilby, 20 rushes for 160 yards, 4 touchdowns. Just an unbelievable performance, a statement game for Dover. And so unlike the game we just talked about, not sure which of those 2 teams is better, Dover made a statement here that they don't belong in the same conversation with Cape in terms of the top echelon of class 3 and the lower part of it. Nothing against Cape, just the reality of this. This was a chance for Cape to really make a statement. Remember, they lost to Sally's, beat William Penn, but again, William Penn they're not in my top 4, and I don't think they're going to be in your top 4. But this gave Cape an opportunity to make a statement. They weren't able to make a statement, still played a solid game. This is a Cape team that last year against this Dover team probably gets running clocked early in the game, and if not in the first half. And so still give credit to Cape for that, but hats off to Chip Knapp. He's got the Senators running in the right direction. And you say it all the time, Marty, first thing they got to do is get Arundel back on their schedule for game 1 for the next 10 years.
That's right. Every time they lose to Arundel, they go on a tremendous run. This game was really surprising to me. Jaquan Kilby, 4 touchdowns, a career high for him, 160 yards on 20 carries. It almost seemed, my theory of this game was Chip Knapp just told his guys all week, no one is talking about you. Everyone is talking about Cape. You and I were. Some of the picks by the different media outlets on Benny's show, they're talking about Cape. And I just think they got sick of hearing it. They said, you know what? Hey, we're still one of the top teams in the state. We lost to an out-of-state team. So did Smyrna. So did Middletown. This is, we can play with these guys. And I think you'd be, and again, we'll talk about this later, but I don't think if someone made the statement that I'd say Dover should be ranked number 1 in the state right now, I don't know that a lot of people would argue with you based on how the games have played out. And again, we'll get to the Middletown game in a little bit, but this team is seriously rolling right now. Cape came in here with a ton of momentum, and Dover just ran the ball down their throats, but they mixed it up really well. The quarterback, Cosme, played. He was not expected to, according to some news outlets I saw. I know he hurt his ribs last week. He played well. John Parker played well. This is a team that's going to do a lot of damage. And I was seriously impressed. I was not expecting a blowout between Dover and Cape. I thought this was going to be one of the games that came down to a missed extra point or something like that.
Got to mention 7, also known as Marky James, had 19 carries for 71 yards and a touchdown. So in his, in his terms, not a spectacular game, but a solid game as well. Dover is going to host Cesar Rodney in that big rivalry, which we already mentioned is going to be a Saturday 12 noon game for the first. Did they do that last year? Did they move it last year? Do you remember?
I'd have to remember.
Look. Doesn't matter, but it's either the first time or the second time that they've moved that game out of its Friday night slot, basically for safety reasons. And they can give us any other reason they want, but that's why they did it. And hats off to them for doing that. And you know what? It's all about the kids playing in the safest atmosphere that you can. Cape has the week off to mull over their most recent loss, and then they're going to head to Delmar, and that's going to be an interesting game because, again, that last year, that might be a game that everybody would favor Delmar. Delmar struggling a little bit to pick up a win, their first win, but will be an interesting thing as well. So Cape with the week off. All right, we're going to go to our newest section of this season in the quick comments section where we talk about a game, but we don't give you as much details as we just have for one reason or another. And we're going to talk about William Penn and Hodson. William Penn with a 20-14 lead. And Marty, I texted you that they turned the ball over 3 fumbles inside the 5, and you texted me right back that they had 9 turnovers total in this game. Not going to win a lot of games with 9 turnovers.
No, they had 5 lost fumbles and 4 interceptions, and still only lost by 6 points with 45 seconds to go in the game. So if you're Frank Moffitt and the coaching staff, you're just kicking yourself over this one. Yeah, this was I, no one, I did not think this was going to be close. I thought, especially the way Hodgson have been playing, they're going to come out here and they're just going to roll over William Penn.
They're like
And so William,
Jekyll and Hyde.
yeah, exactly right. Yeah,
Yep.
right now for me, Del Castle and Hodgson are two teams you just have no idea what they're going to do. Del Castle almost knocks off DMA and then loses by 40 points to Lake Forest. In this one, yeah, Hodgson just again, I watched this late last night because I wasn't able to watch it yesterday during the day. They just can't get anything going offensively. It's the rhythm is not there. London Bright was the quarterback again yesterday. Again, he's out of position. He's their star wide receiver. The regular quarterback was not back, though he did play later in the game. But the William Penn defense was all over the place. But the thing that just killed William Penn, or Hodgson, excuse me, was those 3 fumbles were mostly exchange based.
Yeah.
It wasn't like the defense was doing a lot there. It was just problems with normal part of the procedure of running the offense. So back to the drawing board a little bit for Hodgson. But to me, this was a huge loss because I had said last week, and I think you agreed, that these two teams, it felt like whoever won this game might have the upper hand toward a playoff berth at some point.
Yeah, right now, Hodson's, like you said, you look at their schedule and it's slim pickings. If they play the way they did against William Penn, how many wins they have left. Now, if they play the way they did against Sussex Central, you never know. But this was a game I think both teams needed for the same reason William Penn. You look at their remaining schedule, it's, a couple games that they might not be favored in, but might at least have a chance to win. And then, of course, the powerhouses. William Penn plays at Middletown next week, and Hodson plays at Salesianum. So again, slim pickings in the number of games that they can win, and they're both going to have to be at the top of their game to have any shot to win those 2 games. All right, Middletown, Appoquinimink. To everybody I talked to, figured it'd be a running clock no later than midway through the 3rd quarter. Not the case. Middletown wins 14-0. Their scores were on 2 plays of 80+ yards. One was a punt return and one was a reception. Not the best of tackling in Appo's case again in those 2 plays. And so, this game was a heck of a lot closer than anybody thought. And Marty, I was not impressed with the Middletown offense. Defense, different story. Defense won the game for him. And, every coach has ever coached for Middletown, from Bill DiMonardo to Mark Del Percio to now Zach Plum, they've relied on their defense to get them championships. And they've got a championship type defense. Now, the offense, I wasn't sure what was happening. I didn't understand why they weren't able to connect with the receivers. They didn't have a running back that I looked at and thought, wow, you can't let him touch the ball. And so I was just surprised at the lack of offense for Middletown. Not to discredit the Appo defense. The Appo defense obviously played well.
Oh, yeah. I
was just surprised. And as you said, and this is where we'll, maybe make the argument that Dover belongs in the top slot because, now Dover hasn't played them or Smyrna yet, but, the offense for Dover, we've seen them play and they're good. They have good skill players.
Right.
And the Middletown players are good. You can tell they're good. They just didn't gel as an offense. And there might be a reason for that. I don't know. Like I said, as a casual fan, even I expected a lot more from the Middletown offense than I saw.
And I told you, I thought the same thing. Absolutely. With Troyer at quarterback. And it's funny because I believe he went to Michigan State after that game yesterday. He had a visit at Michigan State, which congratulations to him. He's getting a ton of attention. I'm sure he wasn't thrilled with the way he played in that game. And they're just, and Smyrna seems to be going through the same thing. There just seems to be a lack of overall identity, and the one touchdown, the little button hook that they threw, it was to Tareen Henson, the 84-yard reception. It was like a 13-14 yard throw, and then just terrible angles from the Appo defenders. But that was the only time they really had a breakdown like that. Yeah. And then there was the punt return. So, this game was there was really nothing happening offensively. And I know I texted you later and I said, the one thing that stood out to me was they're going to get Daniel McConomy killed. Appo, he had 30 carries for over 130 yards at halftime. He ended up with 46 carries for 146 yards. And if Appo ran 60 plays, I'd be surprised. He had the ball, or was targeted for the ball on just about every play. And toward the end of the game, and I don't know if you saw the end of the game, he got up very slowly a number of times at the end of that game. I think he's 5'9", 160 pounds. This is not a big kid. No. And he took some tremendous hits. Yeah. So if you're Coach Timpson, you've got to figure out a way to get the forward pass going, even if it's screen plays. Back when Smyrna first got things rolling, they used to play the heck out of the screen, and they would get all these guys in space.
Yep.
They've got to do something to open it up, because McConomy, and by the way, let me just say this, and I know you agree with me, he is an outstanding running back. Middletown was looking for him on every single play, and he still gashed them repeatedly.
Yep.
And that offensive line did a really nice job. Now, again, they've just got to find something going in the passing game, or they're not going to make any headway. This felt like, and you and I called a number of the games, and it's funny because the Middletown kids used to say, well, this is more of a rivalry if you're an Appo kid. For us, it's another game on the schedule. Remember, Mark Del Percio used to say, we don't play against the other team, we play against ourselves. They didn't care about who they were playing. For the Appo kids, they get juiced for this one, and this was their best chance, it felt like, in years, where they were on an even playing field in terms of defense. But they just had those two breakdowns, one on special teams and one on defense, and that was the difference.
Yeah, and they struggle offensively, and they have all season. And like you said, McConomy does what he can. And then, it'll be interesting to see how they react, in the next game. They play at St. George's. So again, St. George's, again, talking about whether you need to win games or not. This has to be a win for St. George's if they're looking to be in that top six in the playoffs, so to speak. But my favorite play before we move on was Elijah Husser. He's 6'8". He's got to be 280 if he's not 300 pounds. He's a two-way lineman. And they brought him in. I think I've seen every play of every Appo game, home games because I'm the PA announcer, but I also go to the away games because my son's in the band. And they brought him in. It was 4th and short. And if they weren't in the red zone, they were very close. Everybody knew the ball was going to McConomy, but they put Husser in on the right hip of Jacob Yard, the quarterback. And I thought, uh-oh. And they hiked the ball, handed to McConomy. Husser sprints to the offensive line and literally runs over. And if you got to see this, go to YouTube, the Appo YouTube page, and watch it. And I forget whether it was the first or second half. It doesn't matter. Literally runs this guy over. Remember that movie Blindside? Everybody's seen Blindside.
Where he drives the guy 60 yards down the field.
Exactly. It was just like that. I mean, he just flattened him. And McConomy,
that's funny.
McConomy went 3 yards, got a first down. And then, it was. What it reminded me of is, my first thought is maybe this will be the next earthquake.
It reminded me of the fridge. Perry.
That too. Where every time we need a yard, we're just gonna make sure McConomy's within 3 inches of Husser's rear end.
Yep,
and it's gonna pick it up automatically. So
I love it.
Anyway, that was just a fun play to watch. All right, last game of the weekend: Howard Archmere. Howard wins 38-24. I was shocked that they won. And I was shocked how easy they were winning up until the end. It ended up being a one-score game, a one-touchdown score game. But it looked for a while where, it was one of those games, Marty, where if I had anything else to do, I would have turned it off at one point because they were down enough that I thought, this game's over, but it's not. So hats off to Dan Ritter. They're now 4-0. They're going to host Mount Pleasant, a game they should win, go to 5-0 halfway through the season. Not a lot of people saw that coming into the season, especially after last year. I don't think anybody thought Archmere would lose to Howard. For whatever reason you want to give, I didn't think they would. But you know what? And it's first time Archmere's lost since they lost to Howard in the title game almost 2 years ago, December of 2020. Yep. And so if you're John Belace, you're probably thinking, you know what? This probably isn't a bad loss.
Not the end of the world.
Not the end of the world. Week 3, we lose a game we probably should have won, probably could have won. Let's lose it now, not in round 2 of the playoffs.
Yep. And this was, one of the things that Middletown has done during this winning streak is they never shoot themselves in the foot. They did it repeatedly against Howard. Wildcat defense, 5 turnovers they forced, 3 fumbles, 2 interceptions. Albero never throws interceptions. No. It just doesn't happen. So this Howard defense they were keyed up to go. And it's funny, as you said, this was a blowout. And then all of a sudden, Archmere started scoring at will, and they get onside kick and they score again. They finally did. Howard got the last onside kick, but RJ Matthews, and we've talked about him a couple times. He is phenomenal. He was great yesterday. 3 rushing TDs yesterday. Alzion Triplet had 100 yards on 20 carries. Kevin Ford caught Howard's only TD pass, and he had an interception at the end of the first half. Howard looked, by all accounts, from everyone I've seen, very good. And if I want to say this, if you want to read a really detailed account of the madness that took place during the third and fourth quarters here, go to the dialogue.org and read Mike Lang's article on this game. It's incredibly detailed, and it'll fill you in on exactly what happened here. Because as you said, if you look at the score, this was a close game, and it ended up being, but this was a blowout until all of a sudden things just got crazy at the end of the game for Howard and for Archmere. This is a huge win for Dan Ritter and his kids from a confidence standpoint. And I was going to echo you exactly with Archmere. No one at Archmere is saying, big deal. But in the grand scheme of things, big deal.
Yeah.
They are still one of, if not the best Division II team or Class II team in the state. They had a bump in the road then, but I agree with you. This is one of those things where as a coach, maybe not the worst thing in the world, because now you get to refocus the guys.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, look, now we get to go back to an underdog role. Somebody beat us. Now we're the guys who have to come back from this. So I think both of these teams come away with this with a ton to gain.
Yeah, I mentioned Howard hosts Mount Pleasant, Archmere hosts Wilmington Friends on Saturday as well. I just looked at the Howard scores. Forget the forfeit DMA. It's a 2-0 score. Their wins, they won 40. They scored 48 points, 56 points, and 38 points. And that's a team that reflects exactly what they are. They've got a lot of tremendous skill players.
They do.
It's going to be tough to outscore Howard. And so, you're going to have to put a lot of points on the board to beat them. And so far, nobody's been able to. All right. We talked about, Marty, we're not halfway through the season yet, but we've seen some teams play 4 times, other teams play 3 times. We're technically done with the official week 3. But when you add the week 0 in, it's, been 4 weeks of football for, 50% of the teams or 40%, whatever it is. And so we decided, let's each give our top 4 teams for each class, not district, but class. So if if the season ended today and not thinking about standings, but just in our mind, we've seen every team play, every team that I'm going to list, I've seen play. And I've also seen what I call my bubble teams play. So I'm not making this based on the fact that I've seen, only 3 of the class 3 teams play. We've seen enough games preparing for the shows, et cetera, to be able to pretty objectively give our opinion, but we're not going to rank them. And so when we rattle them off, these are not 1, 2, 3, 4. These are, if the season ended today, these are who we think are the best 4 teams in each class. I'll let you go first. Let's start with class 1 and work up to 3.
For class 1, I'm going Laurel, St. Elizabeth, Seaford, and Odessa. And I added a dark horse in each one that's just outside. I'm going to say Charters just outside that group, but Laurel, St. E, Seaford, and Odessa to me. Odessa really getting going after that first loss to McCain.
I've got the exact same 4. I didn't do a dark horse, but I have the exact same 4, and I don't disagree with Charter as a dark horse. All right, let's move to 2. I'll go first this time. St. Mark's, Archmere, Caravel, and with the win last night, Howard makes my top 4.
Now, the only way we differ here is instead of Caravel, I have Friends. I have Caravel as my dark horse with Lake Forest just outside of that bunch. I love the way Friends is playing right now with Robert Tattersall quarterback. They've got a chance in any game. Caravel, the only thing I looked at them was that the competition hasn't been great yet. They really haven't been tested. That's a really good football team. I'm not taking anything away from them at all. But for now, I have Archmere, St. Mark's, Howard, and Friends as my, in no particular order, my top 4.
For me, class 3 was the easiest. Class 3 was the easiest after Dover's easy win at Cape. I've got Middletown and with St. George's loss to Sally.
Yes.
That, again, and those are all dark horses. They were the teams I just mentioned, but here are my top 4. And again, no particular order: Middletown, Smyrna, Sussex Central, Dover.
I have the exact same 4.
Yep.
and the Sal's is my one that's currently just outside of that top 4. It just feels like this year, and I know there was a ton of blowouts this week. There was a ton of blowouts last week, but in terms of looking at the championship picture, all 3 divisions look like they're up in the air.
Yeah.
I mean, Laurel is really good. St. E's is having a great year. Seaford is doing great down there. It just feels like 2A, 3A, 1A, doesn't matter. Especially after yesterday with Howard taking down Archmere, everything is wide open.
And I'm excited that Middletown didn't blow out Appoquinimink, because remember, Middletown barely beat Smyrna.
Yes.
And so I think, we had Middletown and Smyrna on a pedestal.
Yep.
They're still top 4. I don't have them guaranteed top 2 anymore. Those top 4, I don't know how I would juggle them. Now, granted, Middletown's Middletown and Smyrna's Smyrna until somebody knocks them off. And, Sussex Central and Dover haven't played those teams yet, and we'll see, and they'll have a chance to prove themselves one way or another. But I'm more excited for the Class 3 tournament. You and I talked about, if somebody said you can only follow, watch, and broadcast one class, which would it be this year? It'd be Class 2, because we both felt that's where there's the biggest parity in the top teams in each of the districts and a chance for people to come. So it's going to be an exciting middle part of the season here. We'll reclassify our top four probably after week 6 or maybe week 7 again.
We'll start talking about the playoffs picture a little bit at that point
get in
as
there.
well.
All right, let's go to our top performances. This is where we pick a team, a unit within a team, or some multiple person, combination of their top performance. I'll let you go first, Marty.
First, and I have 4 this week. My first one is Concord, because it was so easy, and with the way they've struggled the last several years, going into the fourth quarter down 24-7, it would have been so easy to mail that in and just get out of there and go home. Right. And boy, they turned up the heat and dealt a crazy blow that no one saw coming to McCain at the end of that game. So the entire Concord team, the offense came together, the defense came together, special teams played well. So congratulations to Concord. That whole team deserves a shout out.
All right, I'm going to get mine because I think you also picked this one, and I only picked 2, and Concord was one of them. So I want to make sure I get mine. And mine is to that field goal unit you talked about in Sally's. Frank Holodick, the snapper, Jacob Tiberi, the holder, and James Collins, the kicker, nailed 3 kicks, including the game winner, to come away with that 16-14 win over St. George's. As you so appropriately pointed out, Marty, as good as James Collins is, he's nothing if he can't get his foot on the ball with the laces facing the right way. And that all starts with the long snapper. So congratulations to those 3. There's not many football teams in the state of Delaware that say they have a consistent field goal kicker who they trust anywhere inside 50 yards. Sally's has a kicker in James Collins. All right, give your other 2, Marty.
I got the Appo defense giving up only 1 touchdown, and it was a broken play by their defense, some bad angles. I thought they played phenomenally well. And now, again, Middletown's offense didn't really show much, but I thought the Appo defense did great. The last one is Charter in a blowout win over Dickinson. Head coach Brian Winnington, this just kind of jumped out to me. 9 touchdowns for Charter in that game. Danny Houston, 3 touchdown receptions and a pick 6. And Raymond Paoli, their quarterback, 4 passing TDs. This offensive unit was just phenomenal against, and I know they're playing Dickinson and Dickinson struggles, but I just want to give credit where it's due. Charter, I tweeted a few days ago that 2 years ago, Charter was all but dead to the Delaware high school community. Nobody cared about Charter. Nobody even looked at their scores. They were total blowouts anyway. They scored more touchdowns in this game, I think, than they've scored in seasons past, because they used to get shut out all the time by the big boys.
Right.
So congratulations to Charter. They're really getting it going. Again, a great example of why this 3-class system is working.
Yeah, it's tough for anybody to argue that this Class 3 system hasn't been a success in terms of what it was intended to do, which is to give those Class 1 teams an opportunity to not only win games, but to have something to shoot for, winning the district title, going into the playoffs, winning a state championship. And, even though there's some teams that struggle in all 3 of the districts, it has made it much more relevant for other teams than it was before.
And the crowd Charter is drawing to their games is fantastic. It's great to see.
You got a chance to win. Why wouldn't you come watch it? So, all right, it's now time for our top performer segment, sponsored by Mary Kate Johnston of Remax Associates. If you're looking to buy or sell your house, Mary Kate Johnston will help you do it as if it was her own. An award-winning realtor with nearly 20 years of experience, she helped my wife and I sell our old house and purchase the one we've been in for the past 16 years, and helped us every single step of the way with things we had no idea we needed to know about on both ends of the sale of our old house and purchase of the new one. We've since recommended her to dozens of friends who also were her completely satisfied and recommended her to their friends. You might think you understand the real estate market now, where, it's good if you can sell, not so good if you got to buy, but Mary Kate understands how to navigate the market on both ends of a deal, regardless of the economy, whether it's a first home, an upsize or downsize for yourself, an aging parent, or one of your children. Do yourself a favor and reach out to Mary Kate Johnston and let her make sure that you get the best value possible, whether you're buying or selling or both. Her website is marykatej.remax.com. That's marykatej.remax.com. And you can also check out her multiple 5-star reviews on Zillow and read what others have said as well. That's Mary Kate Johnston. All right, let's go to our top performers. I'll go first, Marty. Mine is Sal's kicker, James Collins. 3 field goals, including the game winner. And, it'd be hard to argue he's not the winner of the weekend this week, no matter who you write for, who you broadcast for. That's just an outstanding performance. I bet, it'd be interesting if anybody could look back when the last time is a high school kicker in Delaware kicked 3 field goals of 30 or more yards in a game and made all 3. I'm not sure it's happened in the 15 years I've been broadcasting and doing high school sports. So congratulations to James Collins and also Frank Holodeck, and Jacob Tiberi, part of that unit as well. So Marty, yours?
I have 2 of them. I have, first of all, a guy we talked about a ton last year, and we haven't this year only because it's so early in the season, but Kasim Benson, the running back from St. Elizabeth. He's a smaller guy, 22 carries, 230 yards, and 3 touchdowns this weekend in a shutout over Tatnall. He's averaging 12 yards per carry on the season, 43 carries, 514 yards already, 10 touchdowns. The other one is Jaquan Kilby, because everybody on Cape was focused on him. And no matter when he touched the ball, it was kind of like the McConomy syndrome, except he had guys that were kind of spreading things apart for him too. 20 carries, 160 yards, 4 TDs. Cape's defense had been playing phenomenally well, and Kilby in that offensive line just gashed them all night long.
Yeah, and I had Jaquan as well as my other one as well. So that's our top performers, again, brought to you by Mary Kate Johnson of Remax Associates, a realtor for all of your needs. All right, let's go to our surprises of the week. Marty, you can start with this one.
I got one surprise, but it's got 2 parts to it. Sort of the first one, when I was looking through the standings, Tatnall is 0-3, and
like they were last year, right?
That's right. And I love Coach Aver McMillan is great. He's doing a good job there. But the statistics right now are awful. They've been outscored 112-0. They have yet to score a point this season. Archmere Friends and St. E have blown them out of the water. Here's the thing: Tatnall's going to make the playoffs.
Right.
They're going to do what they did last year. I looked at their schedule. They're going to go into charter on October 22nd, most likely. I'm not guaranteeing it, but at 3-3. I looked at their roster, 34 kids, 18 of them are freshmen and sophomores.
Wow.
These kids are going to take the Odessa route. They're going to get better and better as the season wears on. Archmere Friends and St. E, they've been through the major part of the schedule. They've taken everybody's best licks, and they paid for it. They're gonna be my surprise is they're gonna make noise, even though you may look at it now and say, "Oh my God, this is terrible." Don't count Tatnall out; they're gonna be there.
All right, I'm going to give you 2. Middletown's 14-0 win over Appo. I expected them to win. I did not think it would be within 14 points. In fact, if somebody had told me the over/under is 35, I would have taken the over. And I like Appo. I like what Brian Timpson's doing. I'm a fan because that's where my kids go to high school. But that score did surprise me, and anybody other than a Middletown or Appo fan who tells you differently probably is telling you that because the score ended up being 14-0. Everybody I talked to thought it would be a lot wider than that. So hats off to Appo, the coaching staff, and the players for keeping that game as close as it was, really up until the very end. The other one was that St. Mark's won by just a point. I thought they were heavily favored against Newark. Newark's 2-0. They've done a great job, but St. Mark's, I've seen them play a couple times. I saw them play in person against Appo, and I've watched them on tape, and they look solid. And you mentioned they had a couple kids missing, but not enough kids in my mind to only beat Newark by a point. And yet that's what happened. So a win's a win. But a lot of good came out of that for Jody Russell. I talked to him actually today, and he said he was very proud of his kids for playing to the end. And their goal after the big win last week against Concord was to fix some mistakes. And he said, we fixed them. And so other than not getting a win, they came out of that game with a very positive mindset going into their next game. You have any others?
No, I'm ready to get to the shout outs.
All right. First, we're going to go to the games to go to next week.
Oh, games to go to. I'm sorry.
Yeah, game to go to. I've got a couple. We're not going to go through all of them. Let's each pick. If you have 2, tell me 2, and then I'll give you the 2 others.
You go ahead and go first. I'm trying to see. I think I've misplaced where I wrote these down.
There you go. All right. Well, I probably got all 4 of them because it was hard to come up with 4. Let me put it that way. So Wilmington Friends at Archmere. You've got Robbie Tattersall heading to Yale to play quarterback against Chris Albero. That's going to be a fun game to watch.
Agreed.
The other one is Delmar at Woodbridge, 1-2 versus 1-2. One of those teams is going to make a statement that we're relevant in Class 2, and the other one's going to become hey, let's be glad as many teams making the playoffs as are making the playoffs. Appo St. George's, same situation, 1-2 versus 1-2. One has a chance to really solidify their opportunity to get in the playoffs. The other one's going to be on the outside looking in. And then the last one, Sussex Central at Smyrna. Sussex Central undefeated, coming off a bye. Smyrna 2-1. That's going to be a game that's going to tell us a lot, Marty, where we rank those 4 top teams we just talked about, if they're still in the top 4 in a couple weeks. So a great opportunity to go out and see some really good football this weekend.
And I agree with all 4 of those. The one I had written, and I'm glad you reminded me of it, was Friends in Archmere, because that Tattersall-Albero matchup, and Tattersall plays everywhere for them. He does just about everything. This is going to be a cool matchup to watch. Two schools that have had a really good history in football, and it should be a good one.
All right. Before we do our shout outs, remember our 2 sponsors, Andre L Photography. That's EL, Andre L Photography, for all your photography needs for your high school athlete. They don't play sports forever. Don't miss a chance to have a professional catch them in action. And Mary Kate Johnston of Remax. That's marykatej.remax.com. For all your real estate needs. All right, shout outs. You go first, Marty.
Mine is I'm going to stick with Appo. While the Appo football team was not able to take down the number 1 team, the Appo soccer team was able to take down the number 1 team, not only in the state of Delaware, and I'll let you get to that, but Appo upset Sally's 2-0 on Saturday. And I have to tell you, as you know the reasons for this. I wasn't able to watch the game. My mom watched this game start to finish. I could hear her yelling at the TV. She was so excited at the play of your son, Riley, who was goalie. I got to see later a penalty kick that he stopped against one of the best players around. Just a phenomenal stop. This was a huge, huge win for Appo, and I'll let you finish up a little bit on what was so big nationally about this.
Yeah, what was cool, and I appreciate that, is coming into that game, Salesianum was ranked number 1 in the country in, I think it's the Coaches United poll. And there's probably 30 different polls like there are in.
And I looked at all those polls. Sally's in the top 5 of all of those polls.
And that's what we said. If you're number 1 in one poll, that means you're top 10 in every other poll. And so that's great. Sally's came into the game 4-0 with 4 very solid wins against teams outside of Delaware. Appo played great. I was so happy for my son playing great, but the whole team, I've been watching this team now for a whole season and 4 games. And they played the best effort that they've played, with the exception of when they won in the first round of the playoffs last year. That was an exceptional game as well. But what was pretty cool about it is there's a kid on Appo's team, TJ Hastings, and he's going to Virginia to play soccer. That's how good he is. He actually played in the Delaware Union Academy up in Philadelphia for a few years, where you basically go up there and live. And those kids are meant to be basically training to be professional in somewhere in the world when they go up there. He came back to Appo. Him coming back was one of the main reasons they won the state championship against Sally's 2 years ago in that shootout. And then last year, of course, they made it to the semifinals. A lot of people thought Appo was the second best team in the state, but they faced Sally's in the semifinals the way the brackets worked out. But what was cool is TJ told Riley, we don't win that game without you. And Riley told TJ, we don't win that game without you. And each of them did it without the other one hearing it. Long story short, Riley left his gloves at the field, or TJ picked them up. My wife went to pick them up from TJ, and TJ said, tell Riley we don't win without him. And Riley got in the car after the game with me and got in and he said, boy, that TJ played a heck of a game on defense. We don't win without him. Because basically they played the last 15 minutes of the second half just kicking the ball out of the box.
They did. They did everything defensively.
And just kicking the ball out of the box. They got a score on a great set play that I've never seen them run. And obviously Sally's had never seen them run. Caught him completely off guard, went up 2-0, place went crazy. Anyway, nothing to do with high school football. Proud dad talking here. I appreciate you bringing it up, Marty, and Riley will smile when he hears it.
And I'll give one more shout out. But first, I just want to say, if you're a friend of John's on Facebook, or if you follow his Twitter, you got to find the penalty kick stopped by Riley, because your son Riley, because my favorite part is where you are in the box, because you're the PA announcer. When he stops that kick, the roar from that crowd is incredible. That is a really cool moment. Really, really cool. The other one I wanted to give is 2 guys who I think do a really good job covering football in Delaware as well. And that is, Mike Lang and Jason Winchell. Everybody knows them from 302 Sports. They also have another side gig. They work for the Dialogue in Delaware, the Wilmington Dialogue. It's the dialogue.org. They put, and I go on there every week, and I always keep meaning to say this, they cover the Catholic Conference. Mike writes extensive, very detailed articles on the games. And this week he happened to get the Archmere Howard game again, which was a tremendous game. Jason Winchell takes the pictures. They do a great job in tandem, but a lot of people don't know about the Wilmington Dialogue. But both these guys, in addition to the 302 Sports, do a phenomenal job for the dialogue. And they're two guys. If you're a fan of high school sports, these guys seem to be everywhere, mostly because it looks like they're on the sideline at every game you turn on YouTube, which is awesome. So to those two guys, I just want to say thanks for everything they do for high school sports.
I was home by myself last night when the Howard game started. So I got myself a glass of wine. I went out on my deck. I had my notepad in hand, and I turned on my phone to the Twitter feed, and I saw Mike Lang was there, and I put my notepad down, thought, you know what? I don't have to take notes now because I'm just waiting for the story to come out. And God love Mike. He often, that you see when the story's posted, it's like 2 a.m.
I was going to say, that was like 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. Exactly.
Yeah. But it's got everything you need. And so anytime, and that's where we get our information on that game. That's where I got all my information on the Howard Archmere game was from Mike's story. So great shout out to both those guys. All right. I've got Bill DiNardo winning game number 300. His total record 300, 104, and 1. 7 titles. Coached for Caravel, Middletown, and Sally's. 3 of those titles came when he was with Middletown back in the Division II days. With Sally's, he's won 4 titles. So that's my first shout out. Number 2 is to the Appo High School staff, students, players, cheerleaders, band members, parents, everybody that contributed to making the scene that happened on Friday night as calm as possible. And there'll be some complaints about how some things were handled, but I can tell you, having seen on video what went on at Abyssinia several weeks ago, having seen other places around the country and how those things are handled, I couldn't imagine it have been done any better in terms of doing the most important thing, which is protecting the physical and emotional balance of the kids that were not involved in it. I shouldn't say the kids that were at the school. That's the number one priority. How do we protect the students that are here? And they did that. So hats off to, like I said, I don't know who the head administrator was there that night, whether it was the principal, Sam Postlewaite, or not, but I know Chris Mascara was there and he was involved in every decision that was made on what are we doing next. And so congratulations to them. And then my final shout out, and then we'll wrap it up. Mike Judy's back on the sideline. Yes. Medical leave for a couple of weeks. He's back on the sideline. Not one person is disappointed about that, except maybe the opponents that are still yet to play. That's right. He's back. So, Mike, glad to have you back. All right, that's going to wrap it up for us here. Glad to have you aboard, John Buzby, along with Marty Sheehan. Don't forget to interact with us at Twitter. That's at DELHS Football, and on Facebook at the DELHS Football Pod. Please like us, share us, and subscribe to us. That helps us out, and we really appreciate it. Until next time, for Marty Sheehan, I'm John Buzby. Have a great sports week.